Next on Primary Care, the foods we eat may be affecting our mood and our brain function.
When we eat rich fiber foods, the metabolic byproducts of the breakdown of those foods from the bacteria which feed the gut and train the immune system produce neurochemicals which massage the brain.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lonnie Joe, and welcome to Primary Care, the show dedicated to improving the health of African Americans. Most people know that the foods we eat have a big impact on our physical health, but what many don't realize is just how crucial nutrition is when it comes to the health and performance of our brains. The brain is an organ with very high metabolic and nutritional demands. In fact, the brain accounts for approximately 20% of our daily caloric intake, which is about 400 calories per day. It is composed of primarily fat, about 60%, and contains high levels of essential compounds like cholesterol and omega-3 fatty acids. Given the composition of our brains, it's no wonder the foods we choose to eat have a profound impact on our memory, our mood, our ability to learn, and our behavior. Joining us to share more about the food-brain connection is Vicki Griffin. Ms. Griffin is a nutritionist, author, and she is also an international speaker and has a special interest in nutrition and cognitive brain health. Ms. Griffin, welcome to Primary Care. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much,
Good.
Dr. Joe.
In view of everything that's going on and everybody trying to lose weight and taking an injection and running out at the pharmacy and no manufacturers available and can't get the prescription filled, this is a very timely conversation.
You just said it all in one mouthful.
So our dietary choices definitely affect our mental health.
There is no question about it. In fact, over the last years, I have had the privilege of working with health teams and experts to put together 3 books. One is called Living Free, Finding Freedom from Habits That Hurt. That's this one. Mm-hmm. And it is a book on overcoming addictions, process, substance, and food addictions, just replete with good, useful, helpful information. And then we have one called Diet and Stress, is what you're eating you. And it's about the cortisol connection, insulin resistance in the brain, how to overcome chronic stress through nutrition and lifestyle. And then this one is a favorite. It's called Foods for Thought, Nutrition's Link with Mood, Memory, Learning, and Behavior. And so what we like to say in this work is that we want you to have healthy headquarters. And the battle is not for the bulge, it's for the brain. And it's not about weight control, it's about appetite control. And that's a brain thing. So I have the privilege of running seminars and seeing lives changed. What better thing is there in life to do than to help others to gain victory over besetting habits that are killing them?
I think I saw some statistics recently, since 1957 or something around that time, we have increased the sugar content by about 300% in everything that's on the shelf. Our taste buds have been manipulated to the point that we can't do without sugar in this society. As a physician, I think it's just as bad, maybe even worse than salt.
It's sweet, salt, fat, sweet, salt, fat. And it's very interesting because I was looking up some statistics on sugar consumption, the average consumption, and we're talking about added sugars, anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds.
Right. And when you read labels, you really see it. It says sugar content, added sugars is almost as much as the natural content of the substance.
Yeah, so one of the popular soft drinks, the 20-ounce soda, if you look at the label, it says that there are 8 teaspoons, or it would say 32 grams. But it's 2.5 servings. Mm-hmm. So they don't tell you you're supposed to share this 20-ounce bottle with 1.5 friends.
Right.
So that is 8 plus 8 plus 4, that's 20.
Right. Well,
the
bag contains 8 servings and you eat the whole bag.
Right. So what we say is beware of bottles, bags, and bars.
So dietary factors in terms of all of these things, sugars, processed foods, caffeine, too much of it, the effect on the brain. What are we seeing in terms of cognition? Because everybody's afraid of getting dementia.
Oh, and everybody's depressed and stressed. And in urban areas, I work now in an area where people have very thin margins around their life. They get very little rest. They have little recreation. The resources that are available might be limited. They may be working 2 jobs, and so there's very little money. And so these people tend to have very little margin around their life, very little cushion for being sick. And they may, and the advertising industry tells us, you deserve a break today. Get all of this stuff that is cheap and fast. We call it value food, but there's another kind of value, and that is quality. And it's quality that's going to keep you well and lower your stress. The higher the stress levels and the less margins you have around your life, the fewer margins you have, the more prone you are to sickness, spiritual, mental, and physical. And so for these groups in particular, it is critical to make the best possible choices with that $25 you have.
You know, earlier we were talking about inflammation and things like the metabolic syndrome and how it relates to everything, and in particular the brain. I mean, there's a lot of body of research out there now that talks about how the brain is having trouble metabolizing things because what we have put in through our oral cavity, and therefore you're getting this element of cognition that's changing. That eventually turns out to be a form of or one of the types of dementia. And the next thing you know, we're now seeing it in people below the age of 50.
And 20 years before actual symptoms that we think of as dementia, memory loss, change in gait, that kind of thing, 20 years before the process begins. And so how does it begin? It begins in the parietal area of the brain, which has to do with making commitments and following them.
Exactly.
And so following through, and we're seeing these processes of decay in children.
Yes.
And so how important it is for us to understand that it's all about cellular health. So when we think, one of our magazines is on chronic pain, roots and remedies. There are dietary factors that amplify pain. So when we take in these junk foods, low fiber, I call it the chips, chops, and lollipops lifestyle. Okay, so low fiber foods, calorie dense, rich in saturated fat, animal fat. What happens to the cells of your body, the brain and body cells, is they become less permeable. They become stiffer. They become less electric and less conductive. So the signals cannot function. It also impedes nutrient access.
Yes.
So nutrition is really a 3-legged stool. It's about maximizing the absorption of those nutrients, their utilization within the cell, and their retention. So the eat the cheesecake, take a vitamin thing doesn't work. We have to get these nutrients in the Department of Defense, which is the produce department, in the right ratios. And when you get your nutrients in the right ratios, you are maximizing their absorption, utilization, and retention. And these cell walls, when they become stiff like this, it begins the process of what we call insulin resistance, thyroid hormone resistance. They also are pro-pain because the fatty acids that comprise those cells are pro-inflammatory fatty acids. And this becomes critical in controlling pain.
So an anti-inflammatory diet can actually be not just heart smart, but brain smart also.
It's the battle is for the brain. It lowers inflammation. You were talking to me before the program today about the buzzword that's going around, and it's called systemic inflammation. So we talked for a moment about these saturated fats and how it is pro-pain, pro-inflammatory, but also when we take in all of these refined sugars and all of this type of food, the sugar levels go high, and those sugars in the blood want to combine with proteins, especially older ones. So you start having joint problems and arthritis and issues like that. It's called aging, sugar ages, advanced glycation end products. So you have increased pain. With increased pain comes increased depression, stress, poor sleep habits. But guess what? You and I and our friends out here who have done this process, We are designed by our Creator for renewal, restoration, and recovery. Thankfully, we have backup systems built into us for recovery. So some very simple shifts in dietary practices, and we'll talk about those, can change your entire trajectory of your life.
You touched on stress. People talk about it all the time. They're in the office saying, you know, we have to do something about my stress. Well, I can't cut it out,
No.
but there are things that you're doing that you can cut out.
Well, that's right.
That actually addresses stress.
Well, the opposite of depression, really
Outside
interesting.
of getting rid of your husband or your kids.
Yeah, that's
you know.
true. The opposite of depression is actually not joy and happiness. The opposite of depression is resiliency. It's the ability to tunnel through trouble until you get to the other side. It's the ability to develop the mental mettle to handle a problem.
And can be a good thing.
And it can be a good thing. Sometimes that's the environment in which we grow. But when we talk about stress, it's not all emotional. You know this as a physician, that when a person is insulin resistant, the sugar is not getting, the insulin is not getting the glucose, which is the fuel for the cells, into the cells. So what happens is now your body is stressed from the elevated sugar.
Glucose.
It can't get rid of all of it in the urine. So guess what starts to happen? Your body, as a defense, starts to churn out cortisol. Let's get some cortisol going, which is a stress hormone. Well, why? Because the liver now is going to unite. It causes the liver to release free fatty acids to unite with the sugar and produce triglycerides and put it right around your stomach.
Absolutely.
I can look at someone's stomach and tell they're stressed.
That's right.
But there's a physiologic basis for stress. And it's the cortisol connection from poor diet, and it creates mental stress. And we need to understand that.
And then you want a pill to treat it all.
A pill or a pill or a pastry.
Right. right. Some comfort food. Vicki, tell us about the craze on intermittent fasting now. You know, years ago, fasting was always incorporated into the lifestyle, whether it was just from people who were particular about what foods they ingested and when they ingested, all the way to religious practices. But now it's back again and gaining steam. Tell us about the benefits of intermittent fasting.
Well, and like anything else, that has become a catchword for so many different modalities.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to address with you is what is basic and simple and what I understand and believe works, because I've run some obesity programs, worked in conjunction with lifestyle doctors, and there are some crazy stuff out there with patterns of starvation that actually make the body resistant to losing weight. And we just certainly don't want that. We don't want for people to run around hungry all the time and then they go binge. And so what we want is to establish eating patterns that promote wellness and give the stomach time to work. So our whole bodies are based on circadian rhythms. Everything is in a pattern. To everything there is a time and a season. So a meal eaten in the morning is not going to digest, and the metabolic processes involved in that meal are going to be different than if you eat that meal at night, because we have these rhythms. So we've talked a little bit about meal content, although we haven't gotten to the healthy choices yet, and we will. So for intermittent fasting, here's the important thing to remember for the average person living their life. They can't go work in a machine shop hungry for 2 days. So you have meal content, which is important. Portion control, very important. You go to a restaurant, the plates look like feeding troughs. Mm-hmm. If you buy these plates, you can't even shut your cabinet drawers. So meal content, portion control, meal timing, and meal spacing. These are very important, because if you eat on time every day, first of all, it's fabulous for diabetics to do this, because the pancreas prepares to release insulin to usher the glucose into the cells. So your body will prepare for mealtime and create a hunger sensation, hunger signals. Then when you eat a nice high fiber meal, you don't need to eat again for 4 or 5 hours. That's called fasting. We don't want to snack all day long, because people who snack are going to have 400 to 500 different more calories during the day just from that snacking.
Not to mention they don't give their pancreas time to rebound or relax or anything.
That's exactly right, and the food does not digest properly if you're snacking. The whole process has to stop till the new substance catches up. So we let our stomach do its work. We hydrate between meals. Eat on time every day as much as possible. Meal spacing, meal timing. Why are people having 2,000 calorie chicken and potato, fried chicken, potato, and pie meals at night? Are you going to go out and build a bridge after dinner? And so this interferes with sleep. It actually interferes with immune function, which has to take place at night.
Sure.
Restorative, insulin, blood sugar control the next day is affected. So we want to eat like a king in the morning.
You mentioned something that I've believed in for years, and that is the circadian rhythm effect.
Yes,
of
it's
what
very
we do.
true.
The sun coming up in the morning and going out at night. The tide coming in at night and going out in the morning. That is likened to our internal mechanisms that we deal with.
And cortisol levels fluctuate during the day.
We can draw your blood and show it to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so eating more like a king in the morning, a queen at lunchtime, a pauper at night is a pattern that is concordant with deeper sleep, better insulin control the next day, lower stress levels. So if we have stress in our lives, don't we want to do what we can to lower the physiologic sources of stresses that are driving us to addictions and depression? I would say yes. And these are simple things.
Let's talk about the water story. I was on the plane a week ago, and I think they wanted $8 for bottled water on the plane, okay? You say, and even with all that we do now, we still find patients, especially with underlying diseases like diabetes, who are clinically dehydrated, sitting before me and other providers, okay? The story on water should be a simple one, especially since everybody's in the craze of bottled water now, but it's still an issue. Why aren't we catching up with this in terms of how people are hydrating themselves? And also comment on, again, substituting water for other especially
drinks.
Sugary beverages.
Yeah, I spoke to a pediatrician recently, and he said they're seeing the type of fractures in children that you see in the elderly. Complex fractures that you never used to see in children who broke bones, because the phosphoric acid, the caffeine, these children are on energy drinks, and they also are diuretic in their nature. So there's hydration really is not taking place. And then you add to that the energy drinks and the caffeine. And so one of our information pieces is called the Buzz on Beverages. Rushing roulette is what we're playing. And so we get hypersonic in our energy, but it's like overdrawing your credit card, and you're going to crash and be fatigued. Now I understand that caffeine is a rescue medicine for migraine, but it can also cause these, and it is a psychoactive drug. It's the world's most largely used psychoactive substance, and it is hurting us, and so we need to hydrate with water. Having a nice large cup or glass of water in the morning upon rising with a little lemon juice in it actually charges the system and prepares the digestive tract for the meal that's coming down the pipe.
But what is a kid supposed to do? He's walking home from school here in the Detroit area, and he's going past the gas station which sells everything sugar, okay, or the party store, and he walks in there, and the 2-liter soft drink is 99 cents, but the bottle of water, which is a fourth of the size, is $1.49. He makes a conscious choice to participate erroneously. I mean, it's an education
It is,
problem.
and kids have their own water bottles.
Yeah.
There's water fountains at the school. And so, so one of the big gimmicks is you buy the 64-ounce drink, and the little boys love this. You get the 64-ounce, and then every time you go back, you can get it filled for 99 cents. Such a deal. But it has 150 grams of fructose in it. You'd have to eat 33 peaches in one sitting. Now try that on.
Yeah, I mean, you choke on it.
So the high fructose in these drinks is destroying these children's mouth. It's setting them up for insulin resistance and diabetes. They're pre-diabetic.
So several years ago, the Medical Society looked at what was in vending machines, and it was fructose heaven. I mean, every label on the ingredients was like, oh my God. And people in school settings were visiting them twice a day He said, no wonder we're seeing the kind of disease states, early onset.
Fatty liver in children.
NASH. Yes.
It's hard to make a little boy overweight. I mean, in most cases. There are genetic things, I get that. There are familial, there are all kinds of issues involved. But what we're doing is through these fast foods, we're training our taste buds. So often we think of the tongue as being the taste center. Sweet, salt, bitter, sour. But in reality, there are thousands of taste receptors, genetic taste receptors on the tongue. And the food that glides over those receptors has a cortical response in the brain. And it's really all about the brain. And when we expose our taste buds to new flavors, it turns on the genes for those foods. And we really can learn to love and crave the good stuff.
Absolutely. So you're telling me that, since we're talking about kids a little bit here, you're telling me that one of the reasons we might be experiencing such learning difficulties and deficiencies, especially in public school, inner city youth, it's a function of intake. It's a function of diet. It has plays a huge role in learning. And
when you go to these schools and share with these little children, they go home and inform their parents. I mean, just magnesium alone that's in your beautiful fresh fruits and vegetables, especially the leafy green vegetables. Magnesium alone is responsible for more than 350 enzyme functions. And it's also associated with pain, muscle cramping, cognition, energy levels. So there are multiple micronutrients and macronutrients and phytochemicals, which are non-nutritive substances in the beautiful fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds. These are the jet fuel for sharp mental health, beating stress, dialing down pain, depression, and dysfunction.
So some of the newer medications in terms of approaching weight loss really act in the gut. But the gut is not a single entity by itself, okay? Tell us about...
If we knew how much bacteria was in our gut, we would have never been lonely during the pandemic. You are never alone. You have gut flora, bacteria. That's part of your what's called the microbiome. Your microbiome actually trains the immune system.
Exactly.
And we think of brain chemicals that are involved in mood, memory, learning, and behavior, such as dopamine, serotonin, GABA, and yet 90% of serotonin is produced in the GI tract. Half of dopamine and GABA are produced in the GI tract. Well, how are these neurochemicals produced? By the metabolic breakdown of the gut bacteria. And so the foods that we eat, when we eat rich fiber foods, the metabolic byproducts of the breakdown of those foods from the bacteria which feed the gut and train the immune system produce neurochemicals which massage the brain. However, I talk about something called gangsters in the gut. When we're on a sweet, fat, salt diet with low fiber, it actually recruits a species of bacteria called Firmicutes. When you're on a high plant food diet, it recruits Bacteroides. Now, Firmicutes are not bad, but they get out of control. Like gangsters taking over a town.
They're like the hyena on safari in Africa.
That's right. They're obesogenic. They're depressogenic. They are pro-pain. They tend to amplify all the things that are driving those food cravings. And so we have to get those gangsters out of the gut. The only way to do it is to go to the produce department and start buying. If I had $25 to spend only at the grocery store, I would get oats, beans, greens, apples, and bananas. That's what I would get. That's a baseline healthy diet right there. And I know it sounds boring, but it isn't. There are ways to make those foods amazing. And so that is where we get our soluble fibers, our insoluble fibers, the micronutrients, and resistant starch, which your gut wants. So these are basic things. A banana is about 25 cents. Okay, so, and I went and looked at coupons today. You can get 3 pounds of Pink Lady apples for $3.50. There's 8 apples in one of those bags, 44 cents an apple. And so
Where was that? Myers?
Yes, and that's where I shop. I'm a plebeian. I'm a retiree. I don't live in a villa overlooking the ocean. I go get my oats and beans. When you cook dried beans, that's about 10 cents a serving. You can make them amazing,
Right.
and freeze them in little containers, season them differently. And what I like to do is teach people how to make something simple and use it several different ways, so, rather than having 100 recipes. Who can do that anymore? And I have a little rice cooker from Target. It's just a $14 rice cooker with a little steamer basket. I also have a $125 one from Japan that whistles to you when the rice is
ready,
cooked.
huh?
The $14 one works better. So we can make healthy brown rices and beans and vegetables and salads and create a cuisine that not only satisfies at the fiber level, but also at the cellular and metabolic level.
Exactly.
And brighten up our brains, our bodies, and have the energy to face the day.
I was just reading a month ago about the dietary effect on endorphins and pain control. It's amazing.
It is incredible.
The research is amazing.
It
and
is.
We just got to train the brain.
And the bacteria. Your bacteria need to go for a walk every day. You got to put your bacteria to bed every night. You got to feed them at regular times and feed them the right stuff.
Right.
Fiber is your fabulous forgotten friend.
Yeah, how about
And
that?
we've got to get them back in the house.
Vicki, this has been outstanding. We'll be here all night if we don't wrap this up, but thank you so much for joining us. This is outstanding. We'll have to do it again.
Thank you.
Very good. You can't change your brain health overnight, but you can start making changes to your diet by incorporating brain healthy foods. Thank you for watching. For Primary Care, I'm Dr. Lonnie Joe.